Matthew Bell with InsurancePrescription.com. Today I wanted to survey the different sorts of trusts that are available to you. This is going to be the purview of attorneys. I am not a lawyer. I cannot give legal advice. This is a layman's perspective on these things. I'm simply trying to disclose various pieces of research that I've done that have to do with trust. So we're going to do a very sort of surface level approach here, and I may get into each or some of these various types of trusts in future videos. Number one thing to know about trusts is the three persons who are basically part of the trust situation. So in a trust, the trust is going to be essentially a transference of ownership rights in a particular piece of property or in an asset from a person called the grantor into the trust. Now that granting is done for someone's benefit. It can be for your own benefit if you're the grantor. It could be for the benefit of a son or daughter. It could be for the benefit of a charity. It could be for the benefit of grandkids or somebody down the road in the future that isn't even alive. There are many, many applications, but the grantor grants property to the trust for a particular person's benefit, and that person is called the beneficiary. Now the third thing that is important in a trust is going to be the fact that that asset will then be managed by somebody on behalf of the beneficiary, and that manager is called the trustee. The trustee can be several different people, in which case we would refer to co-trustees, but the idea essentially is that someone grants property to the trust, which is set up for somebody's benefit and managed by a trustee. Now there are many, many kinds of trusts. One important distinction is going to be the difference between a revocable or a revocable trust and an irrevocable or an irrevocable trust. Like the names imply, a revocable trust is one in which the grantor can take the property that he or she has placed into the trust back. They can take it back. They can revoke the trust. In an irrevocable trust, on the other hand, once the grantor has placed property inside the trust, that property is no longer accessible to the grantor, at least as principal. They cannot reclaim the property, they can't reclaim the asset, they can't get the principal back. There are several different kinds of trusts. Again, this is going to be a very surface level approach. One kind is called a charitable-remainder trust. This trust is set up for charitable contributions, and the idea of a remainder is the idea of what's left over. So often in a charitable-remainder trust, a particular grantor will place property into a trust, live off of an income stream that's generated by that asset or property, and then on the passing of the grantor, the remainder will pass to charity, and there'll be certain tax benefits that have to do both with funding and with the passing of that asset. So it's often set up for tax purposes. Consult your lawyer, consult your tax preparer for further information on that. I cannot give advice on any of these vehicles. This is just for general informational or entertainment purposes only. Another kind of trust is called an ILIT, or an irrevocable life insurance trust. We talked previously about the differences between revocable and irrevocable trusts. This is an instance of an irrevocable trust. It's often done for estate planning purposes, for legacy planning purposes. It is an estate tax refunding mechanism, if you want to call it that, or indemnification mechanism, which means once a person has paid an estate tax, or his family, his survivors have paid the estate tax on his or her passing, the life insurance policy can sometimes restore that money to the family. It is sometimes set up when a person gifts a dollar amount to a trust. It is sometimes set up when a person gifts a dollar amount to a trust. That dollar amount is then used by the trust to purchase a life insurance policy on the life of the grantor. The trust is made the beneficiary, and then when that individual passes, the trust is paid the death proceed. Once again, this is often used, but not always, it's often used to pay for estate taxes, but it can be used for any of a number of other purposes, including provisions for special needs, legacy provisions, and other things. Then there's the living trust. This will occupy our attention in a future video. A living trust can be revocable, it can be irrevocable, but the idea of the living trust is that the grantor, the beneficiary, and the trustee or trustees are initially all generally the same person. So in a living trust, a husband and a wife, let's say, might grant property, for example, their house, their bank account, and so on, into the trust, It is set up for their benefit, so they're both the grantor and the beneficiaries, but they're also the managers of that. So they are also the trustees or co-trustees while they live. When one or more passes, the trust document generally specifies a successor trustee that takes over management of those assets on their passing. The main benefit of the living trust is that it helps the family to avoid probate. There's also a generation skipping trust, and this is essentially for legacy planning purposes. There is a family or marital trust, which is very similar. Some of these are going to dovetail together. This one is essentially a survivorship trust. When one person passes, the other takes custody. It's often a revocable trust. It protects the family's assets in certain respects, in certain circumstances. And it can be set up, one of its most popular applications is to make a provision for a minor or non-emancipated younger person, a youth that cannot take custody of the family's assets, cannot manage them legally, and this trust is often set up for the benefit of that child to hold the assets of the family until such time as that child assumes the age when he or she will be able to manage those assets and take ownership of them, him or herself. There's also a Medicaid trust. Medicaid trust is going to be useful in long-term care spending situations. The Medicaid trust is an example of an irrevocable trust where the grantor cannot access the principal or the asset that was placed into the trust. But the benefit of that is that it is not counted as an asset for purposes of Medicaid eligibility. So Medicaid has an asset test, and generally there's an income test. Now, Medicaid is a federal program, but it is administered by the states. So you have to consult a lawyer or an expert in Medicaid for your specific state to make sure that this is drafted correctly. That is vital. If it is set up correctly, there are a number of advantages that it might have for you and your family. If it is not set up correctly, it can be a disaster. If it is set up correctly and there's been at least 5 years between the establishment of the Medicaid trust and the spend down or the Medicaid application process, then it is generally not necessary to report the existence of the trust to Medicaid. But again, consult your lawyer, consult your tax preparer, consult the people who are helping you prepare your Medicaid application. Do not take my word for this. This is too important and too arcane, and the laws change constantly. In this case, the grantor and the trustee cannot be the same person. And that is, again, another important difference between, let's say, a Medicaid trust and a living trust. But once again, the idea here is to separate a certain asset from a person in order that Medicaid does not count that asset against that individual, but the asset can be available for family, perhaps for a special needs son or daughter, for legacy, for some other kind of purpose. Now, a Medicaid trust may still generate an income for the benefit of the person who granted the property, and it therefore may count against the income, may count against the grantor for purposes of the Medicaid income test, but it will not count against the person for the purpose of the asset test, again, provided that it was set up correctly. Now, there are a couple of sub-varieties, and those have to do with whether or not there's an income that is enjoyed by the grantor. You have a family income trust, where the income is retained, and then you have a Medicaid discretionary trust or family discretionary trust, and these are handled differently. The income is at the discretion of the trustee. There's no income that is set in place. Finally, the final sort of trust we'll consider presently is going to be the special needs trust. Special needs trust is going to be set up for a son or daughter or someone in your family who is obviously special needs for one reason or other. They might have a permanent physical or mental disability, be unable to manage their own affairs, something along the lines of that, not be able to hold gainful employment. They might have a terminal illness. There's a number of different reasons a person might have a special needs trust set up for their benefit. The main idea behind the special needs trust is that it would not disqualify, if it is set up correctly, it would not disqualify that beneficiary from Medicaid and Social Security income, disability income, SSI and SSDI type payments. In other words, if the special needs trust has been set up correctly, it would not disqualify the beneficiary from government benefits. There are a number of different funding strategies. It is beyond the scope of this video to get far into those. However, there is a first person special needs trust where a person, let's say, who is the recipient of a judgment in a court, let's say a person was disabled in an accident, they could set up a first person trust with the money that they receive from the judgment. Then there is a third person trust, where somebody else might set up and fund a trust for the benefit of the special needs recipient. Once again, this is beyond the scope of the video to get far in depth. Our purpose here was simply, our ambition here was simply to sketch some of the various types of trusts, and there are many others that are available. Consult a lawyer if you have any interest or think some of these may benefit you or your family. Just as a review, we looked at charitable-remainder trusts, irrevocable life insurance trusts, living trusts, generation skipping trusts, family or marital trusts, Medicaid trust number 6, and number 7, special needs trusts. Once again, I may get into greater detail on one or several of these in future videos, but if what I have said in this video was helpful to you, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel, check back for future content, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.